So this week's Lovefly Podcast, we welcome Judith Apa. Welcome, Judith. We are
Thank you so much.
desperate.
Thank you.
We're desperate to hear your story. You've got so much experience. I tell you, listen, folks, this person, right, she's done so much and has got such a sort of a steep background in it's aviation safety. You're going to love it. So, Judith, welcome. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm coming to you from Toronto, Canada, where it's early in the morning here.
Yeah,
a free day for aviation, though, as we always say.
Yeah, exactly. No, well, I'm very grateful you're getting up a bit early as well to come and talk to the Lovefly crowd. So tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing now. But also, I think when I was looking at your bio, there's lots of great stuff that you've done over the years to get to this point, and it'd be great to get a bit of sense of that in terms of reassuring people as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I don't think when I was growing up, I ever thought that I'd end up in aviation. It wasn't something that was on my radar, so to speak, at all. My dad was always very interested in aviation. He was kind of a wannabe pilot. And my oldest sister at one point was flying to be a flight attendant at different places. And I thought, oh, that's not for me. And my dad was such an aviation enthusiast that on the weekends, he would, what I used to call, drag us to the airport and park us behind the fence and watch airplanes land. And he would take thousands and thousands of pictures. And I used to not be interested at all. I'd say,
really?
I have to go to the airport again with Dad, right? Whereas now, when I go to his house, I want to look at the photo albums and all of this memorabilia from the airplanes that he took pictures of at that time. So it certainly didn't come by kind of naturally like that.
That's really interesting. Yeah. So so it took you by surprise by the sound of it.
It really did. It really did. And I finished my high school and I wasn't really sure what I was going to do. And I wanted to take a little bit of time off. So I actually went to live in France for a couple of years and topped up my French and came home and thought, I still don't know what I want to do. And just kind of naturally went, oh, well, maybe I will look into this flight attendant thing and see what that means, because I'd always loved to travel and do things like that. And I love languages and that sort of thing. So I actually started as a flight attendant with Air Canada back in 1989, a long time ago. It's 35 years coming on this year. So she started in flight and had a great run doing in flight for 2 years with Air Canada before getting laid off. So that was kind of the first aviation job, the first kind of sampling of everything. So that's where it all started.
And then
I got laid off from Air Canada after a big merger and thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And there was actually a ground operations opportunity that had come up with a new airline that had started. Actually, it started in the UK as were they UK 2000? What were they called?
Air 2000.
Air 2000. Thank you.
That's right. Yeah.
It was Air 2000, and they came over to Canada as Canada 3000, and we're starting to run services.
How did they come up with that?
Yeah. So Canada 3000 Airport Services was starting, and they were highlighting in the paper. And I don't want to work on the ground. I don't want to work at the airport. That's not my thing. But it keeps me in aviation until I either get recalled or something else comes up.
So let's just ask you, Judith. So when you went, so obviously reluctantly you thought, oh, I'll go into aviation. Were you hooked then straight away as soon as you started flying?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Oh, the first day. Yeah. We went with Air Canada. It was a 7-week training course in Montreal. And the training kind of academy that they have, I mean, it's all the simulators and everything else. And just absolutely fascinated me from day one. And I think the instructors too were so motivating. They were so passionate about what they do. Aviation folks are very, very passionate. So, and I mean, we all talk about it like it's almost like a cult or a drug, because once you're in, I tried to get out once. I in 35 years, there was 6 months where I didn't work in aviation. And it was the most miserable 6 months of my life.
Yeah.
So I came back happily. So I thought, oh, what else can I do? And I thought, oh, I don't want to do anything else. Thank you very much. So
no, I can't stand that. No, well, you're preaching to the converted with me, as the saying goes. Yeah. So you went from there. So went to the ground operations role with.
I did. So I started as
Canada
a
3000. Wow.
Yes, that's right. But I remember sitting in. We had a kind of a 2-week preparation training to be a passenger agent, and I remember about a week and a half in, I thought, I had absolutely no idea what happened on the ground at an airport. And I wish, as a flight attendant, I'd known more about what happened, because I would have been a way better flight attendant, knowing what the passengers went through, knowing what the process was, knowing what went on at the airport. So as much as I didn't really want to work on the ground, there was so much to it. And I think that was the turning point for me, as I'm not going back in flight. This is this whole world of amazing things. And it really is. It's one of those things where it's never the same day twice. And throughout my whole career and everywhere where it went, there were just so many things in the airline or the ground handling where it didn't fit anywhere else. So we'll give it to the ground folks to do. So you got involved in just amazing projects in so many different directions that just made it so fascinating. But it also allowed me to, over the last 35 years, have a really well-rounded kind of big picture view of almost every position in there. I can't fly an airplane. I wouldn't want to anyway. That's not for me. But I can do pretty much everything else. So you end up having this kind of big picture view to be able to do all sorts of other things.
So that's really, so starting there. So you then gone into ground operations. You've gone. So just talk us through the sort of the career path. I mean, you can start, actually, we've got the options. You could start now and work backwards, or you can start from there and bring us all the way up to date. I don't mind. What are you going to do? It's up to you.
Yeah, I think I'll start back there.
All right.
I started as a passenger agent with Canada 3000 with the ground handling division. Moved into a supervisory role about 6 months later. So I was a supervisor on shift at the airport. And of course, in those days, everything was manual. So we checked in passengers manually with paper tickets, with no computers, with, writing the number and the name on the bag tags. There was nothing computerized at all about anything these days. So, the 3 a.m. shift at the airport meant 5,000 people queuing up in front of you that you had to manage and do. Much different than it was today. But you know what, though, now, when the computer system fails, it's so simple to do because we lived and breathed that manual process, right? Whereas folks coming in now start computerized and have absolutely no idea what to do when things stop, right? Whereas we were raised that way almost.
I always used to feel sorry for the passenger service agents, seeing those big snaky queues coming towards them, when you couldn't pre-check in and all that sort of stuff.
Totally different world than it is now, right? Yeah. At that point, I just became a supervisor, and I got recalled by Air Canada to go and fly. So it was a big decision point too. It's like, do I go back to this life of flying and kind of not necessarily being home all the time, or do I continue this? So I made the decision to stay on the ground. And from that point on, I spent 10 years with Canada 3000. So I ended up getting into training, and I would fly to different stations around the world and train other folks, to work the flights and handle the flights at the airport. And that was this newfound passion as well. I love the operation, but training for me was my first exposure to that. And that just then flowed naturally for my whole career as well. So that gave me a taste of that. And it was, once I'd had my daughter, I didn't want to come back to the 12-hour shifts at the airport. So I actually went into customer service in the head office and was settling baggage claims and dealing with all the irate passengers on the phone and by correspondence and everything else. But then a full-time training position came up. So I got into that, and that led me into kind of policies and procedures, handling all the procedural manuals and that sort of thing. So training and development and all the procedures and stuff was kind of the last of my few years at Canada 3000. And then 9/11 happened. So that kind of was a big shift for everything. And the airline went bankrupt after that. So I went through my first bankruptcy with an airline. And that was tough, but made it through. And that's when I left aviation for a few months. An opportunity came up for a government job downtown, nothing to do with aviation. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'll have this steady life and I'll have a pension and I'll have all of these things that aviation didn't necessarily bring me. And that lasted not even 6 months. An old colleague had phoned me up and said, oh, Judith, there's this airline, they're hiring in this position, and it's training and procedures and all of these things that you love. No, I'm good here. I take the train every day to the city. And they said, oh, just come and have a chat with this person. And it was a person that I already knew in the industry. And yeah, the rest is history. I'm still here. So very grateful to that person for that phone call that day anyway.
That was quite easy then, just to say thanks, but no thanks. You just, I'm going to go and leave this job here. So who was that you, not who was it, but where did you start with at that point?
I went to, that was Air Transat, where I spent another 19 years.
Wow.
Right up until COVID, actually. So, but it was a very similar role with, training procedures and all the stuff that I loved doing. But that's where I got introduced to the safety side of things, which was really just, again, another kind of avenue that I went down that went, wow, there's so much to this. This is amazing. So I started doing kind of incident investigation from the ground side. So I was still doing my job, but working on the safety team. And when we got safety reports about different things, we would kind of investigate and figure out what was going on and have these meetings about safety. And in Canada, I mean, SMS or safety management systems were just kind of coming in at that time. Right after 9/11, the government said, okay, airlines, ground handlers, you need to manage your safety better than you've been doing.
Right.
So you're going to manage yourself to a certain degree. You're going to show us what you do to manage your safety, and then we're going to come in and check up on you and see where that goes. So that was kind of, the start of that kind of safety management concept in my mind. So, we created a lot of stuff from scratch as audit programs and that sort of thing to build this up. And it was just this whole other avenue of amazing things.
So sorry to interrupt. So what was the goal then of I get after 9/11 things had to change for a lot of airlines. What was the goal with having more sort of audits and stuff and you having to change the procedures at the airport? Because I always felt like it was pretty safe anyway, so I didn't quite. But what was that big change for you?
It's the oversight that was necessary of your own operations. And I think in those days, people weren't going to run to the regulator and say, oops, we made a mistake. It was more you'd handle it yourself, but you're not going to go tell on yourself. It was very much a culture where, if something happened, not that you covered it up necessarily, but you didn't openly embrace it.
Yes.
One of to kind of jump ahead a little bit, when we talk about safety, and I do a lot of training and things like that on safety management systems. And the goal is to have more safety reports coming into your system. So whether you're a ground handler or an airline, you need safety information flowing in. You need this safety culture where people can come forward and say, I made a mistake and I scratched the side of the airplane, or I damaged this and I need to tell you that I've done this.
Yes.
And the more reports we have, the better it is. It doesn't mean that you're not safe because you have 100 safety reports this month and you had 50 last year. Yes. Information is key, and when you have it, then you can do something with it. So that's where this kind of change took place in the industry, where we went, wow, we actually have to manage this and encourage this. And the classic story was that if you damaged the airplane, you'd be fired. Well, am I going to tell you I damaged the airplane if I know I'm going to be fired right away, or am I going to try to cover it up? That was the kind of culture we had back then, where that person's out, Well, guess what? If you keep that person, they're probably going to be one of the safest workers you'll ever have.
Yeah.
Because they learned from that, and you retrained them, or you did whatever you needed to do to get them back to that point. But they're going to be that much more diligent and careful going forward, right? They went through that experience that said, hey, this has happened to me and I've learned from it. Right. And there's also, I think, that feeling, and whether it's generational or it's in any industry where, well, that's not going to happen to me. Right. This is, when we work around an airplane, it's $100 million machine, and, we're all running around it. To me, the ramp area is almost like Legoland, right? We've all got these little vehicles and these little things, and we're driving around the airplane. it's a very strange place to be, but you don't realize the dangers that are there. I mean, you've got these massive engines, you've got all of these things going on down there, and this massive machine, but you think it's not going to happen to you. So sometimes you need the reality of what can happen and why we need to work safely around the airplane as well.
So, yeah, I totally agree. I mean, how do you think you managed to achieve that? Like, no fear of, removing the blame thrower, it's like stopping people feeling like they're going to lose their jobs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's that safety culture, and that safety culture is so hard to build. So one of the things I do now, kind of jumping ahead, is I do audits on ground handling companies. So I go to an airport or the headquarters of a ground handler, and there's two parts to the audit. There's documentation and implementation. So I go into a ground handler. I'm going to one next week. Actually, I leave tomorrow morning. And I'll look at all of their procedural manuals and say, okay, do you have a procedure for this? Do you have a procedure for this? Is it in your manual? Is it accessible to your staff? Do you train them on this particular procedure? Okay. And then I go out and I watch their flights, and I watch their folks in action actually doing it. And I go and chat with them and say, hey, what about this scenario? What about that scenario? So when we turn that into culture, one of the things that we look at is, what kind of safety policy do they have in place? How do they promote safety? How, is there safety policy on the wall that says, hey, we want you to go home at the end of the day. Here's what's important to us as an organization, and we want to keep you safe, and the customer safe, and the airline safe, and the airplane safe. And then we want that policy to encourage people to report. Please come forward with anything. They should be able to report confidentially, so that their name isn't blasted across everywhere. Yes. So there's no preconceived notions about what they're coming forward with, because maybe they want to come forward and say, well, my supervisor is asking me to skip steps in safety, and I'm not comfortable with that. Well, you don't want you can't go and tell your supervisor that, because they're the one that's doing something wrong. So it's building that culture, and it's proving yourself that you are taking their safety seriously as workers. And it's hard to build, and it takes a long time to change. And some countries are very different. I go into some countries, and their reporting culture is, you know what, I'll be fired. I'll lose my job.
Yes.
Okay, well, we've got a lot of work to do. Or a lot of ground handlers will say to me, yeah, the staff feels so comfortable. They just come up and tell us, but, there's really not much information, coming in. Have you asked them why they're not reporting? Because I can guarantee you that one of the things that they'll probably say is, oh, I've reported this 100 times and no one's done anything about it. Right? Or they might say, I've reported it last time and nothing changed. And, so it's all about supporting your staff, encouraging them to report, feeding back to them when they have reported, and say, you know what, that was a really great suggestion or comment or issue. And this is what we've done or not done about it. Right? And encouraging that sort of thing. And I always encourage.
So can I just ask you, because I have a nervous flyer in my head now, be going, right, what's been reported and not been done anything about? Because now I'm worried that something's going to, because that's what they'll be thinking when they listen to this. So what are you talking, what sort of things are you talking about? The minor things, or are you just like,
for the most
toilets,
part,
is it what it
Yeah. And it's what you want, of course, is proactive reporting, right?
Yeah.
Hey, this didn't happen, but you know what? I'm concerned it could. Or, maybe even just in the equipment that they're driving, that it could be something about the workplace itself. It could be something about training, but you're encouraging everything to come out. Because once we have that, then we can do something about it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's amazing to see the change and the shift in all these organizations over the years. And, every year we get safer and safer, and there's a reason for that. But we get there with this data. When we have no data to work with, then it's much more of a challenge.
Yes.
So once we have these reports coming in, we can, put them in buckets and categorize them to say, okay, you know what? We've had 5 people tell us about this one issue. You know what? Last year, we only had 1 the whole year. So now proactively, we can look ahead and say, you know what? This tracking and trending is allowing us to see that we do have an increase somewhere. Let's get on this right away. So we go back internally and say, are their procedures right? Is it an old policy that maybe we should fix up? Should we retrain our staff? So it creates this amazing proactive cycle, because we get this information, we can start to predict and trend. And now with with automation and Power BI. And I mean, it's amazing the kind of statistics we can get now. And we can predict stuff before it happens. And that's the whole key to it. So the more information we can feed in with the, oh, I just maybe want to tell you about this, leads to this amazing, amazing ability to go and tweak and fix things.
Yeah. Because I guess a lot of people might be thinking, what is the ground handling side of it all about? Because you know, and in fairness, I've never worked on the ground. So I worked at the airport, but that's very different. I was, nothing to do with the airlines then. So I would, maybe you could give us sort of a bit of an idea of some of the things that you're auditing, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. And with the auditing, it's really the start to finish. And I think when we think about the airports, I think probably people assume that when we go and travel with Air Canada and we go to the airport, that all those people are employed by Air Canada. And in some cases, they absolutely are. So the people that check us in and load our baggage and handle the airplane and, empty the toilets and fill the water and all of that work for the airline. But in a lot of cases, they don't. They work for ground handlers.
Yes.
So some airports might allow 4, 5, 6 ground handlers to come in and have a license to work at that airport. And these companies may handle one airline or they may handle 50 airlines.
Yeah.
So they're the ones that are doing the work. They're the ones that are touching the customer, the product, the airplane, and everything else. And there's amazing, amazing ground handlers around the world. There's a lot of really, really good, strong, big companies that do things very, very well. And those are the ones that I interact with on the audits, is these ground handlers around the world. So, it's been really nice to see their transition as well, because with safety, so much of it is focused on the airlines, but the ground handlers are the one actually touching the airplane and doing it on the ground side. So it's just as important of everything that we do on the safety side when it flies, right? So they're mandated in a lot of countries or a lot of airports to have their own safety system or have some sort of safety certification like the one that I audit for. So that's just bringing this, it's bringing common standards to ground handlers. So if we think about that concept that, a ground handler might handle 50 different airlines, what we want to avoid is every airline having a different procedure. Because then if I'm checking in British Airways this morning and then Air Canada this afternoon and then, Ethiopian Airlines this evening and somebody else the next day, I've got to try and remember, this one, handles the airplane this way and this one does it this way. What we want is that standardization. So many of the airline and airport and aviation associations are all about that standardization. Let's all agree to handle the airplane this way. It's this type of airplane, let's do this. And what that's now bringing in is this level of consistency that adds just so much more safety in there, because we don't have to think about, it's this airplane, so they want, 3 different cones around this engine and they want me to drive this way and do these sorts of things when they're handling it. So we're getting to this point of having so much more of a consistent service and safety standards that allows for the incident rates and everything to be going down. Because now we don't have to remember 55 different ways to do something. It
kind of makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, it seems so obvious when you say it. But I imagine, but I can understand how these little nuances can, exist between different handlers, particularly if their work. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Yeah. So, I mean, generally, this, obviously, commercial aviation, we always talk about being super, super safe anyway. And all of these improvements you're making are just making it safer and safer all the time. But you're looking at things from new angles, aren't you, I guess?
Yeah. Yeah. And like we said earlier, with these statistics and these reports and the analysis of things that we're able to do, it's that predictive model now where we say, you know what, we're seeing a bit of an increase in this, so we can go back and fix and tweak before something happens. And that's the level that safety, aviation safety has brought us to now, where we're able to get so much information that we can run through trackers or do it manually and say, you know what, things are increasing, let's fix this, let's tweak.
Yeah. I think it's mind blowing because one of the great honors of being doing this podcast is that I'm learning so much about things I just didn't know about.
Yeah.
And I find it fascinating how your route into aviation has ended you up here now.
Yeah.
There's probably more of an aviation, we use the word geek, than perhaps your dad was, and I just find that fascinating that now you're like just so into it to the detail,
Yeah. Oh, I'd rather fly than drive on the highway. That's for sure. I mean, there's no question about, feeling safe in a car versus feeling safe in an airplane. I mean, it's, for many, many years, the last dozen or so years, my position was more a headquarters position in Montreal. So I would actually commute most weeks, probably 3 weeks out of floor, or I would go to Montreal on a Tuesday morning and come back on a Friday. So I flew to work basically for all those times. And it was just, another way to commute. And I would take an airplane and that's how I would.
As you do. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So instead of driving, I took a plane. So one of the things I wish I'd done all those years ago when I started was track how many times I flew. I'd be fascinated to know what that number is. And it's too late now. My dad actually has a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet, and he has logged every single flight he's ever taken, the registration, tail number, the route, and he can tell you. I actually have a copy of it here. He can tell you every single airplane he's ever been on it. I teach in an aviation program here in Canada as well, and the folks that come through that program most of them are in it to be flight attendants. We actually have a 1 year and a 2 year program, and it's kind of like a prep course because going through flight attendant training is really, really intense at an airline. It's tough, and it's, safety drills and everything else. The service comes later, but the safety side of it is huge. And it's fascinating to me to see these folks that want to be flight attendants, but I come at it from the ground perspective, and I teach them about the ground support that happens when you fly, especially if something happens and the safety and things that are going on the ground. So it's great because not that I convert them, but I convince a lot of them, say, think about the ground too. Flying is great. It's a fantastic career, but don't dismiss the ground.
Yes.
And actually do a placement at the airport in a ground position. And that leads a lot of them to these great careers on the ground as well. So it's really fun to kind of see their transformation. And
you're a bit of a sneaky recruiter then, really. Let's be honest. Let's call it what it is.
Yeah. And I tell them from the beginning, I understand you want to fly. It's great. But hear me out. Look at what I'm able to do now. This is a career on the ground that has brought me to this point. I mean, I stopped working for an airline full-time just in the middle of the pandemic. And I'd been doing all these things on the side anyway. I'd been auditing on my vacation. I'd been teaching at the college, before I started my day. I would do an early class and that sort of thing. And I was juggling all of these great things. And then COVID happened, and it pushed me over the cliff and said, hey, you always wanted to do all of these things and be involved in this. Here's your chance. So it forced me to take that step. And now I'm in this position of being able to do all of these things, and I do a lot of training for ground handlers on their safety culture and improving their safety and how they can better manage safety in their organizations. And I work with some previous colleagues as well on, we actually have some software that helps manage safety at ground handlers or airline, but we've tweaked it from our airline perspective. So there's 3 of us, all from the background of airlines. So we have a product now where it's a platform to help them manage their safety. So they can put all their safety reporting through it. They can do all their auditing through it. And it keeps everything in one place and helps you sort it all out. So it's amazing to see the development of that through, again, it's the safety world, but there's so many tools now out there to help people manage it so much better as well.
I find it, I just love talking to people who love what they do. Yeah. Because there's something that comes off them. It's like get it from you. So you're very passionate about what you do. Yeah. You're really invested. And you still feel like you're learning as well, you know.
Oh,
So
I learn
you
every
get,
day.
you know,
Every day. Yeah.
I mean, there's something I've got to tell you, folks, is Judith said in the, that she watches aircraft investigation every day or something, which is just, I always say to our newest flights, never watch it, because unfortunately, you can't get those images out of your head. You've got to look at it from a position of being, you know, not having no fear of flying, because then you can be curious. What did we learn from that, you know? But so how long have you had this sort of strange...
Should I tell you that nicest... I've watched it while I was flying? So WestJet, when I used to do all that commuting, WestJet Airlines here in Canada, used to have the satellite TV, the live TV that you could watch when they first installed all their screens. So I would actually watch that program while I was flying.
Oh, I bet people loved sitting next to you, didn't they?
Yeah, no.
And it never triggered you. How's that possible?
No, it just, I guess because I know what's going on, and I know the folks that have handled the airplane, and I trust them. I've lived this life for so long, and everybody's so focused on making sure that that flight is safe. You know, the people that there's so much training involved in ground handling, and there's so much now oversight and like we said, follow-ups on all of these things, that we've made it such a safe way to be transported. You know, it's so much more comfortable than being on the highway. I mean, the highways here in Toronto are, you know, we have 16 lanes across, you know, the busy highways, and in rush hour, you've got all this stuff going on. I would much rather be in an airplane, you know.
Yes.
But the air crash investigation side of it is just the learning experience, right? It's the dissection of something that did happen, and it's, you know, what is the root cause? What were the contributing factors? What actually happened? And you can see the changes that are then made in the industry as a result of it. So, you know, we know that this happened. Now we fix it, and now everything's so much safer. So with every one thing that happens, you know, it strengthens everything as we go. So we get to this point now where, you know, it is so safe, and it is something that, you know, we don't have to worry about as passengers, right? We can get on and know that these people are trained, they've been audited, they've got these great safety cultures, they've got this nice reporting culture. And everybody that's touching the airplane that day is invested in that, and they handle it as if their family were on board. You know, nobody's goal is to make something, to do something not as well as it should, because we know that there's precious people on board that we need to take care of. So
I love what you just said there, Judith, about, you know, they treat it as if their family are on board, because occasionally I get a question on the different places that we do our Lovefly stuff, and one of them is around, okay, so the pilots, the cabin crew, you know, the ground staff, but what's to stop some, you know, a cleaner just coming on and slipping something on there, and what's to stop somebody else doing this, you know? So they have these images of all these people sort of like being able to have access to the aircraft. What would you say to that from your experience to reassure them?
There's so many layers in place. There's so many layers in place. You know, and it differs by country sometimes what kind of security is around that. But most of the places where I go and audit, I mean, everybody that comes to that airplane is searched every single time they walk up to the airplane. I mean, fully searched and logged before they actually can go on. And then they forgot something that they need. They get off the airplane, go pick up another bucket to come back on. They're searched again. You know, in some countries, even on the ground side, as they come to the airplane again, everybody's searched, and there's security people all around. So there's been so many layers put in that it just makes it very, very, very difficult.
That's helpful.
For things like that. Yeah, absolutely. That's where, again, that oversight and stuff comes in when we talk about auditing. But every ground handler and every airline has their own audit program and their own oversight program, where they have internal auditors that are going around regularly and checking and watching and sampling. And, you know, there's so much oversight now too with cameras at airports. You can be sitting in an office such as mine, and you're watching the airplane at the gate from a camera on the roof. So you can see if somebody, is driving too quickly around the airplane, or is there somebody there with a different uniform that's not supposed to be there. So you don't even have to be at the airplane. You've got all of this amazing CCTV and oversight as well, layered on top of it. And the airport's watching you as well, so there's eyes and ears absolutely everywhere.
Interesting. So I thought, obviously, as things improve, you can do that. I reckon that most of our nervous flyers would probably love to be able to get a live feed so they could personally check their aircraft and go, I want to make sure it's safe.
Yeah.
But they don't need to, because you're on it. So what's the sort of a typical day for you then, like doing your job? Well, tell us about this week that's coming up. I mean, obviously you don't have to say which airline, whatever you're auditing, but just sort of like give us a bit of a flavor of just the range of things that you might do.
Yeah, so I am doing an audit next week in a beautiful, warm, sunny location that I'm very much looking forward to going to.
Toronto.
4-day. What's that?
Toronto.
Yeah, no. much further down south than that. But yeah, so I've been planning and working with this ground handler for, I guess, 3-4 months in the planning stages. I'm working with another auditor, actually another Canadian one. And so we're flying down. So Monday morning, we have an opening meeting with them, and we'll say, we're here for the audit. These are the things that we're going to talk to, people that we need to talk to, the things that we're going to look at. And then we do the documentation side first. So I have a checklist of, with the substandards, it's about 1,000 things that I'm going to be asking them to demonstrate. Goodness. So, even though, let's say my main checklist of how their organization is structured has 77 questions on it. But like I said, with substandards, some of the things are, so I want to see the safety policy. I want to see the safety reports. I want to see any incidents that have happened in the investigation and the root cause and what we did about it. We scour through their training records to make sure everybody's being trained when they're supposed to. We're looking through even drug and alcohol testing and what the policy is at that provider and all those sorts of things. So it's training, it's safety, it's quality, it's procedures. So I'll work with them kind of 3/4 of the day doing that. And then we go outside and we watch flights. So I'm standing behind the check-in counter. I'm watching the agents check in passengers, watching the documentation checks. Are they asking the security or the dangerous goods questions? And then we go down to the airplane and I watch them room the airplane. I watch them load the airplane, offload signing everything off they're supposed to be doing. Are they protecting themselves, but protecting the airplane as well? So are they, they can't drive faster than walking speed around the airplane, for example. So are they driving too fast? Are they doing anything dangerous, around the airplane? And we watch as many flights as we possibly can over the course of that period as well. The end of every day, we do a quick debrief. This is where we're up to. This is what we're going to do tomorrow. And then Thursday afternoon, the end of the 4th day, we'll do a closing meeting, and anything that we found becomes a finding. And we then go through a process of, okay, how are we going to fix this? So they will, a month later, submit to me, this is our plan. Right. We're going to change this procedure. We're going to do this training. We're going to, then go out and retrain everybody. And then to make sure it's worked, we're going to go back a month later. So they have to submit this whole plan of what they're going to do to fix whatever we found. And then they go out and fix it. Then they bring me back the fix.
So what happens if they don't? If they said, oh, sod that, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. Then they won't get this as a safety certificate. They won't achieve the audit. So it's okay to have findings because it's a continuous improvement process in safety, right? It's never going to be perfect. Ever. We deal with human beings and we deal with everything. But for us, it's a fresh set of eyes coming into your organization to say, So it's not that we're finding stuff that doesn't exist. My gosh, no. We're finding that, you know what, you're doing 9 things out of 10, but we think if you did this, you can tighten it up even more. Have you considered doing this? So it's just bringing them to another level of safety because they've already got all of these things in place. They've all got training. They've all got procedures. They've all got oversight. But we come in with this fresh set of eyes to say, you know what? In our experience, this works as well. And, in this particular case, what if we did this? So it's just bringing them from a 9 to a 10. We're not starting at 0. There's nobody, they wouldn't be able to operate if that was the case.
No, that makes sense. I mean, and so that's continuous improvement, marginal
Absolutely.
gains. Yeah, I love it. That's good. And that's very reassuring to hear it. So I think I'm going to put my sort of nervous flyer out on again. So that say, nervous flyers listen to this. What would you say to them in terms of the ground handling operations, all that side that you know so much about, and plus all the other stuff you know, to say to them that would say, this is why you should trust commercial aviation?
Yeah.
What would you say?
It's just at the point now where it is so safe. And I mean, like myself, I feel very comfortable in an airplane, obviously, but I also feel very comfortable when my parents go in an airplane, when my family and my kids and anybody else that I know and love goes in an airplane. I'd rather see them there than in other scenarios. Like when you know what's behind it, it gives you the confidence to know that it's just going to be absolutely fine.
Yeah.
And it's, there's so many layers of protection in there. It's that classic Swiss cheese model, right? Where, all the holes have to be lined up. And in any incident or accident that we see, as minor as it could be, it's not just one thing that causes something to happen. It's so many things in a row lined up that the odds are very, very slim that to have all that. There's so many different layers of things. There's so much oversight now. There's so much safety-minded, so many safety-minded companies now shining through with what they've developed over the years, that it's the safest place to be. Much rather be there than the bus or the train or the car, like I said. So I trust my life with it every single day and don't even hesitate. So
yeah, that's a great little, that's a mic drop there, isn't it? But so what next for you, Judith? Because you've done tons of stuff already, haven't you?
Yeah.
I saw that you'd visited 20 countries. So you've 50 countries, 20%. Yeah. So I'm guessing you're going to be ticking the others off. Is that the plan?
I hope so. Yeah. Actually, I'll be going to Chile in April, so that'll be country 51 for me. Right now it's just this really nice blend of, a little bit of training, a little bit of the college, a little bit of auditing, a little bit of work with the software. I'm juggling these things, and it's just bringing me this really nice mix of stuff. It's never the same day twice, but from here, I don't even know. It's just this really nice balance of things right now that I love. And who knows? I like I said, it's 35 years this year, but it's absolutely nowhere near the end for me. So we'll see what happens from here. Who knows? But
I love that.
The safety part has just allowed me to just bring all of these experiences kind of into one spot and just have this amazing kind of relationship with safety, where I like I said, I've learned kind of the safety, but when you're in it and you live it and you breathe it, it's just this development of these amazing things in any industry or culture. I mean, the more safety that you see there, the more confidence you have in the product. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of places are trying to learn from the aviation industry because of that, aren't they? And I've had many pilots on there talk about it. They can say, I don't know the answer to something. And no one goes, oh, well, you don't know. He said, well, if I go somewhere else, they'll be like, oh, I can't believe you didn't know that, Whereas it's like, it's okay to say, I don't know, I don't understand. Explain to me again, because it's about getting it right, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's about what you do when you don't get it right. What are you doing about that? And how you're taking that as an opportunity. I mean, that's what we say at auditing too, a finding is an opportunity, and it absolutely is.
Yeah.
It means that, someone's identified maybe a small little weakness that we can now fix. Again, it's that proactive look at it. So, that layer of oversight is finding small little things that if we let them go for years and years are going to be a problem.
Yes.
Right. So we can fill those holes and not have to worry about it.
Oh, I love that. That's a good way to put it. So for the geeky enthusiasts listening in thinking, I want to read more around this, where would you say it was a safe place to point them to look at articles and the sort of stuff that's, not the normal media nonsense, but just a sort of a safe deposit, where would you send them?
Oh, that's a great question.
Is it? Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm not sure I know the answer.
I didn't know I was going to ask it, but I was just thinking, I had sort of there's a couple of people on the site, like Lisa and Jamie, who I'm just name checking.
Yeah.
And I know that they'd be reading that, but there's also people who read these things because of nervousness still.
Yeah.
It's not just out of curiosity.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I do for my students every week is I do a little PowerPoint presentation before our regular session to say what's new in aviation this week. And right now I have 2 classes. I have a class that is first semester, enthusiastic, coming in and with stars in their eyes. And my third semester class is emergency airport operations that I teach them. So I say, hey, if there is an emergency that's happening in flight, here's what we're doing on the ground. So we talk about air traffic control and all the folks at the airport that are going to support any kind of emergency. So I scoured a bunch of different aviation news sites and newsletters and that sort of thing. And I capture things to put in this little PowerPoint. So during the week, I populate it with everything. So safety plus customer service and good news stories and somebody's on strike or things like that. But then I filter it because my first year folks, I don't necessarily want to, have too much of the safety side of things.
Yes.
So I save that for my third semester class. But for me, it's just those aviation kind of news feeds and, reading about, what was it a few weeks ago on Royal Air Maroc on the one route into Montreal, they've now had their third baby being born in flight on that particular route, and things like that. There's always interesting, quirky things happening in aviation as well that are always worth chatting about and mentioning and things like that, or there was one last month where they were flying a giant panda from one zoo to another.
Of course.
So they had pictures of, the crate. You never know what's underneath, in the bottom of the airplane when you're flying, right? And it could be that was this giant panda that was going from one zoo to another, or horses or giraffes and all kinds of things. So I always make sure that I'm feeding them with all of these kind of aviation stories and things that have happened in the news that particular week. And
I don't know how you find time for all that. Crikey.
Yeah.
This one, I can't imagine how you move a giraffe. I can't think what aircraft hold would be big enough for that, but I guess there must be.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing. And especially too, through the pandemic, air cargo increased so much. Passengers stopped flying, but we started moving so much more goods around the world because of the need for that. So, you also had a lot more airplanes that were kind of converted into all cargo airplanes as well too. So yeah, it's fascinating on the cargo side. I remember being in Mexico City a couple of years ago, and it was an all cargo 747. So it was like a 747-400 freighter. So you're loading underneath, you're loading huge. On top, you're loading through the nose. Just amazing stuff.
Yeah.
Really, really cool. It's always, I think it's amazing too to see inside an airplane or inside the hold of an airplane. And I don't know if any of your viewers ever get to do that on any occasion at all, but just to see how it all works and the pieces that comes together is really, really fascinating.
Yes, I think you can do some airport experience days where they might allow you to do that, but I think they are few and far between. But I think it's great if you ever can.
Yeah,
because it is. I mean, like, you're exposed to a whole world that I don't very little about.
Yeah. I went to an aviation museum in Seattle last year, and they have like a parking lot of airplanes that you go in and crawl around and see, and you can see the cross sections of everything. And I mean, I was like a kid in a candy store. I take thousands of pictures around it, but it's amazing just to see how it all comes together. I got an opportunity years ago to go to the Airbus plant in Toulouse. We were taking delivery of our first A340 airplane. I was on the assembly line of the A340, and you're watching these airplanes in each stage of it. Like, we were crawling around inside the wing, and it just amazing stuff.
Oh, I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
Well, I had a little bit of a geek out there. We did the RAF Duxford in the UK, and they've got tons and tons of aircraft that part there from, right back to sort of First World War era, right up to the current day. There's Concorde in there. That was great, seeing so many planes put together like that. But it's crawling around inside the wing and to do the assembly. I think that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, I got jealous. What a life you've got.
It's pretty amazing. I think too, sometimes I don't realize, like, people will say, well, where are you going next week? Oh, I'm going here and I'm going there and I'm going to see this and that. And they go, and I go, oh, it's just another airport or another country or another hotel sometimes, right? But you kind of lose sight sometimes of, wow, this aviation world it's just amazing.
Oh, well, Judith Apa, thank you very much for that. That was fabulous. And there's lots of really nice, reassuring messages in there, particularly around all the oversight that you were talking about and how you're just continually improving and auditing and in your findings, the way you put that across. That was really helpful. Yeah. I think also, I know this is an area that a lot of people have asked about, and we've not really had anybody on with your expertise before. So thank you.
Pleasure. And you said it's the safest way to get from A to B in my eyes. So I hope it brought some reassurance to some folks to know that there's just so much behind the scenes and so many layers of safety involved. So that's the goal.
Superb. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks.